in. So this one says, what is to stop the crossings from becoming a breeding ground for predators?
So it's there. This is a question that does come up. It seems like there is it's almost like a myth. It's something that comes up time and time again. And it's my understanding from the scientists who've looked at this issue that out of the literally, I mean, I'm thinking of Banff in particular. It's hundreds of thousands of sort of photos and over 150,000 documented crossings by 11 plus large mammals in Banff. And they have monitoring cameras on most of those structures in order to assess how well they're doing. And I think they have one image of I think it's a moose being chased by a wolf. But there is zero scientific evidence of crossing structures becoming prey traps, which is sort of the shorthand lingo for that issue. And I think, there are a lot of reasons I think that it kind of anecdotally makes sense why that might be the case. And I'm thinking in particular of when you're looking at how to design a crossing, there are studies about how deer will be reluctant to go through a crossing or something that looks like a long tunnel, or if they don't have what's called line of sight, which is basically when you stand at the opening to, let's call it an underpass. If you're standing at that opening to that underpass, and if you're a deer and you can't see all the way through that underpass to light on the other side and kind of know where you're going, then there's a lot of evidence that deer will turn around and not go through that crossing. So some of the things that I think make the species, the prey species in particular, reluctant to put themselves in certain situations that they believe will potentially get them eaten. Taking into consideration some of those behaviors, and when you're designing the structure, helps make them successful from the perspective of passing the prey species while not giving the predator an advantage. And the other thing I'll note on that just quickly is, and this is a case study I'm aware of from Arizona, where they had two underpasses and one had a ledge at a higher level that was sort of an opportunity for a predator potentially to be up on a hidden ledge. And they documented fewer crossings of ungulates through that, or deer mostly in this instance, going through that crossing, as opposed to another crossing that was part of the same network that pretty much had the exact same dimensions. Everything else was almost identical except for that ledge. So of course, what Arizona DOT figured out was, let's not put ledges, let's not have underpass construction that involves ledges, because without the ledges works better.
And just to add to that, with this migration in specifically, that migration crosses over that area really within about a 2-week period, maybe a month it's stretched out over. But those animals are moving a long distance. And so they're only really around any density, that area, for about a 2-week period. And so even if there was a predator, and a predator took a deer, it's really not going to start killing massive amounts of deer. That, mountain lion doesn't have a problem taking deer down. It's not going to look at that as any kind of help and suddenly hang around there. Mountain lions have a huge home range of which they circle around on a constant basis. So if they took a deer there and fed on it for a few days, they're going to move on and carry on round. It's, animal predators just don't work in that way, where they're going to sit there and just kill deer after deer after deer. So it's really not going to affect the population in any way.
Awesome. That was a great question. So moving on, what was the biggest challenge you faced when filming, and how did you solve it?
Okay, well, I think the biggest challenge was actually not so much filming related as much as I broke my leg filming another project. I was actually hit by an elk while filming an elk release. And this was this was 4 weeks before the migration. So we were we were in the second year. I'd filmed the construction and the deer coming over and crossing the road, which is where, I managed to film that impact. And then the second year started and I had filmed the first crossings. And then we were into the next part of the migration. I was filming, say, another project. An elk was released, turned around, came at me, and I was down on my knees and I swung around and snapped both the bones in my leg. 4 weeks later, after I was told I mustn't walk on my leg for 5 weeks because I had a crack in my ankle, the migration was on. And because it meant so much to me to get the footage, I got my wife to drive me out there, and popping lots of painkillers. I sat for 13 hours a day out on the mountain after getting up on crutches, and filmed the overpass to get some of that footage. So that was probably the hardest thing, because I was 4 weeks into a broken leg and I couldn't actually put any weight on it. So that was pretty tough. Other than that, really just try that particular herd is not habituated to humans in any way. They're semi-habituated to the road because they have to cross it, so they're used to the sounds of traffic. But to try and get close to that herd anywhere else other than around the road was very difficult, because if they saw you from even quarter of a mile away, they would go in the opposite direction. So it meant just being very, very patient, using the long lenses, and waiting really for the deer to come to me in a hide and pass by me to get some of that close-up footage.
Well, that sounds like a pretty big problem to me. But that's an amazing story. That's really awesome that you got your wife to drive you.
Oh, we just lost Soames. We're on our own.
Uh-oh, that's trouble. I am always amazed when I hear that story, and I know I've seen a couple of photos of Jake, and I think it's really illustrative of his dedication to this issue. So, oh, hello, you're back! Yay!
Hi, sorry about that.
We were about to start singing.
Oh, that would have been fun. Okay, sorry about that. So next question is, how exactly is the success of these greenways monitored? Are game cameras or telemetry data used to monitor wildlife crossings?
Yeah, I can say something to this, and I'm sure Renee can do a better job. But I know that NDOW, the Department of Wildlife, and also NDOT, the Department of Transportation, both have cameras out monitoring those overpasses, and they're trail cameras in certain places on the mouths of those overpasses and in the middle, and they can really keep an eye on what is using them, get an idea of how many deer are crossing. Obviously, in the film we spoke about GPS satellite collars on the deer as well, so that gives a good idea of where the herd is moving. I think when we were filming, there were 100, I think actually Carrie said it in the film, there's about 120 or 130 deer that had satellite collars on in the herd, and the herd ranges in the thousands. But they have a good idea where that herd is moving, and they can keep an eye on how it's crossing over those overpasses.
Thank you, Jake. I mean, the only thing I would add, and it's not from Nevada crossings, but again, as part of that 17-year Banff study, one of the things that they did, because of course, one of the questions you sometimes is, okay, is it 10 deer crossing, or is it the same deer crossing 10 times? And so do you have enough? So number one, how many crossings are individual crossings? And number two, do you have enough connectivity across these structures in order to maintain genetic diversity on both sides? And so in particular, to look at that issue of genetic diversity, Michael Sawaya, Tony Clevenger, and I know I'm forgetting some other people who worked on this study, so forgive me, but they did a study where they actually put a strand of barbed wire across the structures in Banff. And this was focused in particular on grizzly bears. And so when the bear would go underneath the hair snag, it would grab a little bit of its hair. And then they sent that out for genetic testing in order to determine how many different, so it gives you all kinds of information, right? So are you having individual bears crossing? What kind of genetic flow do you have? What are the family structures? Is there any sort of family structure in terms of which animals are using the crossings? And so in addition to confirming that there was sufficient genetic flow for grizzlies across the structures in Banff, they were also able to figure out that, and this to me was incredible, that when they looked at the difference between some of the smaller underpasses and the larger open, wide overpasses, or if you think of like a raised bridge, like a bridge that's up on pillars and the animals going under, again, with these sort of large landscape view sheds that the animals seeing, they were able to determine that females with young of the year, so the cubs for the bears, they were the ones who were in particular using those wide open span bridges and also the wide, larger overpass structures. And they were in fact avoiding or using less often the underpass structures. So when you think about at the end of the day, in terms of where the next generation is coming from, and in particular for the species where basically it's the mom and the young, and the dad is involved in sort of the breeding, but then isn't involved from then on, getting those family groups of moms and young of the year across those structures is absolutely critical. And that was something nobody knew we were going to discover from those studies. So that was pretty exciting.
Awesome. That's really cool. So I'm not sure if either of you would be good at answering this, but how would you suggest younger kids and K through 12 students, or honestly anyone, get involved with these projects? I'm going to do a little plug for Wild Virginia. Wild Virginia has a lot of stuff going on. You can check out our website. We have a lot of great things going on. But if there's anything else that you guys want to say about that.
So I would have thrown that to you first of all. So thank you for taking that one on. I mean, the other thing I would say is, I know ARC has, and Nevada as well, have been involved in putting together some school curricula for K through 12. We're actually have pilot tested both elementary and middle school. We're working with some partners in hopes of having a high school module available. I know that doesn't directly answer the question, but I do think there are opportunities to engage K through 12, both with respect. So to me, the reason that education is relevant there, of course, is that when you look at some of the activities that these curricula involve, it's looking in your own communities. If there are areas where you see wildlife carcasses on the road, or that you see live wildlife crossing. My dream is that we have a world in which communities who see this happening basically start grassroots efforts to see what can be done in their community. And, there are, I know this is more specific to, I know more of the statistics out west, but again, thinking of my mom, which for folks who heard my little introduction, my mom has been in, 2 wildlife vehicle collisions involving deer in Virginia. And so I think having those educational modules that cover some of those topics about, how do you learn about this issue? How do you figure out where to put these crossings? How do you get them built, right? How do you talk to decision makers? How do you as a community decide whether this is an important issue for you? Those to me are things that can really kind of set the table, if you will, for coming up with where should we target and what should we do to make things happen? happen. And that's where, of course, the wonderful work that Wild Virginia and other partners of yours are doing on the ground. So thanks again for that.
Yeah, I'd say definitely check out Wild Virginia's website. You can look at our volunteer page, and we have a bunch of ways to get involved. Also, if you're feeling crafty, you can write, email, or call any of your local representatives. I bet they love receiving all of our letters. So honestly, I'd say Wild Virginia is the first place to look. But okay, so this next question is, what inspires both of you to become a part of this type of work?
Shall I go with that one first? I grew up on a wildlife park, which was actually a sanctuary to begin with, and it was rescuing native British wildlife and nurturing it back to health and releasing it. And then now having the tools available to me as a filmmaker to raise awareness about projects like this. When Renee and Nova approached me about making this film, I loved the idea of it, and it was something that came out very well and has raised a lot of awareness just doing the festival circuit in the last year. And so for me, it's I come from a wildlife background. I love the impact that I can make with film, and when it's with projects like this that have such an incredible solution that we just need to raise awareness so that people are aware that this solution works. There's many conservation issues out there that don't have full-on solutions, right? We're still trying to work on solutions, and it's like, we're deforesting the planet, and it's like, how do we stop this? But with this, there's a proven solution. And as Renee says in the film, it works for 75 years. It costs less money than doing nothing. Why wouldn't we do it? And I have the power with the tools I have as a filmmaker to raise awareness with that. And so that inspires me every day I wake up and start a new project. That's what keeps me going. So.
I feel like you hit a lot of the elements for me as well. I am the person who would drive by and see a dead animal on the side of the road, and I found it very personally upsetting. And so when I had an opportunity to begin working on this issue about 10 years ago, I felt like I, had just hit the jackpot. And it's an issue that has been, it's as I said, it's near and dear to my heart. And so I think it's just something that, especially because, as Jake said, there are so many environmental issues we face today, and there aren't, we don't know exactly what to do, and what we do doesn't always turn out the way we think it will. So, that is the beauty of working on this issue, and I feel very, very privileged to be able to do this. So.
Awesome. Great. That's so inspiring. Thank you, guys. Well, it looks like we are about out of time for questions. If anyone else has any more questions, just put them in the comments and we can try and respond to your comment. But thank you so much, guys. So I'm going to introduce Misty, who is my supervisor at Wild Virginia, and she's just going to say thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This was great. I'm even more inspired than I was before. Thank you so much. I've been working on this for about 5 years, and I'm still just as excited as I was when I started. So I love seeing simple solutions that can solve big problems, and I think we're really onto something here. So I wanted to share with everybody what you can do right now before you go to bed tonight. We actually have a bill in the Virginia General Assembly. It's Senate Bill 1274, and this bill would actually help protect wildlife corridors and help wildlife crossings get built in our state. So I hope everyone, before they go to bed, will follow up on the email that I'm going to send you all out, and it's going to help you know who to call and what to say. But basically, we just are asking you to call on your elected representatives in the Virginia House of Delegates and encourage them to support this bill. It'll make a big difference, and it'll help us get some work done on the ground. I also hope before you go to bed that you'll all become members of Wild Virginia if you're not already. And I'm also going to send an email about that. And we're also going to share what you can do if you're not in Virginia at the federal level ideas about ways you can get involved and things you can do to support this work. But I just want to thank again all of the folks that joined us tonight and all of you that joined us online and all of you that fought through the technical difficulties. Thank you for sticking with us. And I'll turn it back over to Soms.
From us. As I mentioned earlier, if anyone else has any other questions or wants to say thank you to our amazing guests, just drop it in the comments and we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks, guys.